this was one of the craziest early weekends of NFL football I think I've ever seen, to be honest with you. So we're going to start off on the NFC side because that's where a lot of the action was this past week. So I want to get your guys' take on this. Who had the most devastating loss in the NFC this week? J-Rob, we'll start off with you.
Most devastating loss in the NFC. To be honest, I think it'd be easy for me to cop out and go by Monday's result between the Falcons and the Eagles. But truthfully, MJ, I knew your defense was going to look like that. I had no doubts by the product I saw on the field. I thought this was...
You thought the defensive line was going to be that bad?
Yes, because Bryce Huff was a New York Jet, and I knew that the acquisition was not going to change life for your defensive line like you thought. You're not replacing Hassan Reddick with Bryce Huff and getting the same level of production. I don't think Bryce Huff is a bad player, but you're literally trying to replace your lead sack leader and adding another guy to replicate that. When it's not easy to do that at that level. Fletcher Cox retired. I love Brandon Graham, but he's not the same guy he was at his heyday. The secondary isn't great. You spent a first round pick on Quinyon Mitchell. Let's turn some of that tape on because he's clearly a young player who doesn't understand down and distance. He doesn't understand situations yet. There was a cover 2 ball over his head that I thought learned in college that you're not going to take that cookie in the flat. You're going to let a smash concept go right over your head. A lot of these things we saw last season. So I think taking the Eagles is really just a cop-out because everything that we're seeing replicated with the Eagles, too many people are caught up with the offensive acquisitions on your team, and not enough people are talking about the lack of acquisition on the defensive side of the ball. I love C.J. Gardner-Johnson back, but there's still other holes that need to be looked at on that side of the ball. And so the Eagles would be the easy pick, but I'm actually going to go with the Detroit Lions. I think the part that worries me about the Detroit Lions is they're not an underdog story anymore. Nobody's preparing for the Lions like, oh, this is the Lions. People have expectations for this football team now. And in the game where you sack the opposing team's quarterback 5 times, but one player sacked their best quarterback 5 times. And shout out to Baker Mayfield, because I want to give Tampa Bay their credit. They won that game. This is just to say that the Lions, whatever dominant team they thought they were going to be, because beating the Los Angeles Rams, who are by far a team that I cover closer, the Chargers and the Rams, I cover closely than any team in the league currently in my life. There's not a team in the NFL more injured than the Rams. Not a team in the league. Half the team is inactive or on IR because they do not have a squad. So beating them in your home opener was never going to impress me. However, going on back in your home, not able to beat Tampa Bay, who you beat a season ago in the playoffs, who really look like one of the sleeper teams in the NFC right now. Those are the type of matchups that show you the type of team that they're going to be. And that kind of gives you an outlook on the rest of the season. And so this idea, the defense still, to me, secondary, still a little suspect. I don't know if the offensive line is still as dominant as it was a season ago. So we're going to have to see how this team unfolds because very much so this could have just been a bad game by the Lions. But I do think they need to be prepared that they're going to go through an NFL season where every team, NFC or AFC, looks at you as a potential Super Bowl NFC championship contender. So you're going to get that respect by every team you face. You are no longer an underdog. And so you need to head into these games with an attitude of knowing that we are considered one of the top teams in this league, and teams are going to treat us as such.
Yeah, and one thing that I want to add on to that, J-Rob, another reason why that loss was pretty devastating for the Lions is this is a team that now has continuity. This isn't a team like, we'll talk about Dallas. They have some new pieces that they're working into their team. That's going to take a little bit of time for that to develop. The Lions are different. There are obviously adding DJ Reader and Terrion Arnold, those are new pieces. But at the end of the day, the core of that team is still intact. Pretty much everybody that they had last year is there this year. That's why that's a devastating loss. And yeah, they were not impressive versus the Los Angeles Rams. And you talked about it. They are a team that is flat out decimated with injuries. And I'm going to be honest with you, even if that team was fully healthy, I think the Rams are kind of overrated going into this season.
They faced several injuries. I mean, here's what I'll say too. The way that the Cardinals beat the crap out the Rams, it makes the Lions overtime win look worse because you saw what Matthew Stafford was working with. Puka's out. Now all they had was Cooper Kupp, and he's out here cooking, and now he's out too. The offensive line was in shambles, and Matthew Stafford, you clearly see that Lions secondary. I don't see it improved that much from what it was last year. So I see what you're saying. I'm gonna go a different route though. Look, y'all all know my heart is with the Birds, and they're not going to be my most devastating loss. It's devastating for me, but I'll talk about devastating for just in the whole league. I'll go the Cowboys. Now, before I go there, let me say with the Eagles, the reason why I'm not saying the Eagles is because of this. One thing that people are glossing over, yes, it was a terrible loss, but Jalen Hurts showed he's still mobile. I've been the one. I'm a Jalen Hurts supporter. I might be one of his biggest supporters. And I looked at him against Green Bay, and I was like, is Green Bay's defense that good, or is Jalen Hurts taking a step back as a mobile running back? And if he's taking a step back, that's a concern because his ability to be a dual threat quarterback is a big reason why I have him as one of the best quarterbacks in this league. We see him rush for over 80 yards. That's a great sign for Philly, even though it was a heartbreaking loss. I'm going to go to the Dallas Cowboys because of one thing and one thing only. Their aura in terms of winning games at home, it might be lost. I mean, you talk about the last time they had a home game, they got trounced by Jordan Love and the Packers. I had so much faith. I told my friends, I was like, bro, go ahead, bet that money line on the Cowboys. Like, they gonna win against a subpar team that I thought in the Saints that just beat up on the Panthers. And I think it's to be determined how good the Saints are. I'm not gonna call them a contender yet. Now, if they go ahead and beat the Eagles and the Chiefs, all right, now we talking. All right, I'll give them their respect. But until then, I ain't going. I'm gonna wait to see. That's pending. But like, these are games. Dallas as a 6.5-point favorite at home. That's a gimme. And in the first half, y'all give up 35 points. This run defense is terrible. Micah Parsons, where is he at? Inconsistent. I'm not even going to be on Dak Prescott for real. I'm not even going because if your defense give up 35 points in the first half, I mean, what more do you expect him to put up over 30 points with his team? I don't expect him to do that, and I'd be on Dak a lot, but I can't expect that much from Cuz. So ultimately, having a situation where your home field advantage might not be what it used to be should be very, very alarming for this Dallas Cowboys team.
I want to add to that real quick. The thing that really worries me about the Cowboys is that they win one way and they lose one way. You never see this team in a dogfight and they pull it out at the end. Like you saw that in the Seattle game last year. And there was a game versus the Eagles where it was a little bit of a dogfight there and they lost close. But my problem is they win by knockout and they lose by knockout. Yeah. There's really no in between there. Mm-hmm. And what that shows me is that, hey, when you win, it's because you're so much more talented than the other team and your talent overwhelms them because they don't have some elaborate scheme, at least on the offensive side of the ball. We'll see what the defensive side of the ball brings with Mike Zimmer. I'm not ready to say just yet what the defense, that it's a bad defense, just because I do believe in some of the personnel on the team. I'm going to have to wait and see what Mike Zimmer does there. But this is a real problem with the Cowboys in the Mike McCarthy era. They win one of two ways, and that's just not sustainable when you get into the playoffs and you have teams that can legitimately out-scheme you on top of the fact that they're as talented, if not even more talented than what the Cowboys are. So,
Yeah.
my thing going into this season was Mike McCarthy should not be the coach of this football team. And I think you're starting to see why that probably should be the case, that he's not the head coach of the
Let me
football
ask
team.
them real quick. So who would be like in replacement of Mike? Because one thing about Mike, it's like you got Mike McCarthy, you got Sean Payton. One guy is super praised, another guy is like, oh, he's like terrible. Hey, Mike McCarthy, he ain't Andy Reid, but
yeah,
I mean he done. I mean, he pretty
But
good.
But I think it's not even about that Mike McCarthy can't be the head coach. I think he needs to get out of the offensive playbook. I think some of the issues is, I think there's a lot of coaches out here who are calling plays or calling defenses, like DeMeco Ryans, he's called the Houston Texans defense. You got Sean McVay, he's calling the plays over there in Los Angeles. And some guys are really good at it. You got Mike McDaniel over there in Miami, great play caller. But some guys don't need to call plays. I think that my issue when I look at a Mike McCarthy is you can be a head coach and be a lead decision maker on the field. I'm fine with that. But conceptually, when it comes to these plays, I do think at times it's a bit outdated. And I think it's very predictable. Sometimes it's real like run, pass. You know what you're going to get on situational downs. And I think that's when it begins to get a little lethargic for these offenses in the National Football League, is when as a fan or a viewer is looking at a game and we know on based off of down and distance what play you're possibly going to call, and then you're going to go out there and it is the exact prediction. If the casual fan is able to predict that, what do you think an opposing defense is going to do? These are players with that hundreds of thousands of years worth of snaps. You know what I'm saying? They have so much experience that if it looks remedial to the average fan, what do you think it looks like to your opponent? So I do think the Cowboys may not need to take him out of as the lead guy, but may need to take the duty of the play calling and put it on the hands of somebody else.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to get down too much of a rabbit hole here, so this is the last point I'll make about it. But it's like you see Clint Kubiak and what he's doing in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. Like if you replace Dak and Derek Carr, Dak would be looking like Derek Carr right now, if not better, because I think we can all agree that Dak's a better quarterback than Derek Carr. And that's my thing with the Cowboys. It's like, hey, just because you might not have the running back personnel doesn't mean you need to suck at running the football. Your scheme, the run scheme is just not good. I mean, there's no creativity in the run game whatsoever. You're not seeing these elaborate run concepts where you have motion at the snap or just shifting guys and, hey, we're going to pull offensive guards and have all this eye candy. You don't see that. It's hey, inside zone. Deuce Vaughn, inside zone. Why is Deuce Vaughn running inside zone? I don't understand. But I'm going to say this, though. I think the most devastating loss in the NFC this past weekend was the Eagles. And here's the reason why I say that. The Eagles could have lost 1,000 different ways. You can't lose that way, where there's questionable coaching decisions over the course of the game. And now come post-game, you're hearing a guy like Nick Sirianni talk about, hey, that was Kellen Moore's call. It's like now the players are looking and they're like, okay, so who's the real leader on this team? You're the head coach, but are you really the leader? It seems like it seems like Nick Sirianni has been stripped of all of his responsibilities as a coach. And if the Eagles would have just went out there and Atlanta just showed that they were a clearly more talented team on that night, you could probably stomach that loss and say, hey, it just wasn't our night. But the fact that there were questionable coaching decisions throughout the course of the game, and this is a team that we look at, all three of us look at and say, yeah, they may lack talent on the defensive side of the ball, but their offense is good enough to where they can win anywhere from 9 to 12 games.
Facts.
And when you look at, something that I think we've all talked about, questions in leadership, especially at, the coaching ranks for the Eagles. So for them to lose that game because of poor coaching decisions, I think that that's something that's devastating for that football team in the early season.
Yeah, let me say this about Nick. I mean, I'm far from a Nick Sirianni supporter. I feel like you see the same type of stuff that were his problems in his first year. How many ineligible players downfield did we see? A certain point, it's like if you keep seeing that time and time again that happened in your first year, that's on the head coach. It's on the head coach. My biggest issue with Nick was like, all right, you go ahead and go for 4th and 4 on the second drive. All right, cool. Y'all don't get it. All right, cool. I'm cool with it. People were saying go for the field goal.
Yeah,
I personally, I'm like, bro, like you got
cool
this, this great offense. You feel me? Like you got this great offense. Put it in the hands of
Jalen Hurts and all his weapons.
Let them cut. Like you can get 4 yards. All right, don't happen. Live and die by it. But then when them palms get sweaty and it was clutch time. All right, cool. You know, Saquon Barkley, he dropped the ball, and yeah, that was he definitely folded in that moment. But it's 4th and 3. Do you trust Jalen Hurts and Saquon to get you 3 yards? Or do you trust that defense that couldn't get to the quarterback all night to get a stop? I would rather put the ball in the hands of Saquon again, because he's not going to mess up twice, or Jalen Hurts. And if they go ahead and, you know, not get it, then all right, cool. Then they still got to march down the field again. So that's my thing. Like, don't be aggressive and then try to be conservative at the end. Like Dan Campbell, you see what Dan Campbell, he's going to go for it every time. And you know he is. And it's like that's his mantra. And I feel like his players, they can respect that. And my last point is, the most disappointing thing wasn't even the game for me. It was today. Because today a report came out that Jalen Carter, he missed that first series because he was late to a team meeting or something.
I saw that too.
And so, look, Philadelphia Inquirer is fantastic newspaper. Jeff McClain is one of the best writers in the business. And sources, you know, told him, or they told the Inquirer what happened. What that tells me is a player or somebody on the squad is leaking information about another player
or a staff member in the building.
It makes no sense. That's worse than the freaking loss, because now it's like Jalen Carter's gonna be like, who's
talking about me?
Who's talking about me? Who's talking behind my back? So now it's mistrust, and that falls on Nick Sirianni, that falls on Jalen Hurts, that falls on Brandon Graham, these leaders of the team, because family business stays inside. It doesn't go out. Discipline him, but keep that. We don't need to hear that. So that was more disappointing than the loss to me, because that shows, hey, all those rumblings that we heard like last year and this team ain't together, hearing stuff like that in week 2, man. That's very concerning.
And that's one of the things with the Eagles, which was my hesitation. It's what's around the Eagles right now. It's not just the guys in the locker room. It seems like that's a very political oriented organization. Like obviously there's politics in every organization, but some organizations have more politics than the other. And it seems like the Eagles are one of those organizations where the politics seems to be running thin on some key leaders in that organization.
Well, it's Philadelphia, so standards.
Yeah.
I think it's the standards of the organization. But before we get to this last time, I just want to leave with one thing that I wanted to just say to my NFL fans, and specifically my Atlanta Falcons fans. Don't use this game against the Eagles as the measuring stick for your season, because I want y'all all to know that Eagles defensive line is not the one that you're used to seeing. And if you give Kirk Cousins 10 seconds to pat the ball and scan the field, he's going to find people open. But to my Atlanta Falcons fans, that offensive line is not going to look like that every night. That was a matchup situation. I still think Kirk does not look 100% with his lower extremity from his lower extremity injury a year ago. I don't think he's still able to throw the ball at a high level outside the numbers. I still think at some points he's lacked velocity on them throws. And for those who say, well, J-Rob, he made that cover 2 shot to throw to Drake London. Yeah, those are wide open throws. I expect him to hit those. But when it comes to having to step in and make a throw in a tight window outside the numbers, I don't know if he's at that part, if he's there yet. And so for Atlanta Falcons fans, yeah, great win. You took the game, deserve everything you got in that moment. But I would not look at that game and breathe easy heading into the future, because I really think your offensive line is going to look more similar to how it looked in the Pittsburgh Steelers game week 1 than it did against the Eagles Monday night.